The Queen is dead. Long live the King. Ever since I was very young, I remember seeing pictures of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. There was one picture in particular which I remember thinking as a very young child how much she looked like my own mother, although I knew enough to know that she wasn't, of course. But there were pictures of the Queen everywhere. I remember sorting through pennies, not the new pennies that we came to know in later years, but proper pennies, like this. And I remember separating those with the portrait of the Queen from those still in circulation bearing the heads of previous kings. Every time we sent or received a letter, there she was, adorning every postage stamp issued by the Royal Mail. Barely a day would go by without her picture in one of many daily newspapers, even if not on the front page, and of course she regularly appeared on our television sets as she made appearances not only throughout the country but throughout the world, in which she was likely better known than any other living person. Perhaps the most anticipated encounter was her annual Christmas message, traditionally broadcast at 3 o'clock in the afternoon each Christmas Day. Once dinner had been consumed and dishes hopefully all washed up, we would invite Her Majesty into our family living rooms to hear her words of wisdom as she recounted events of the past year and spoke of better days to come. Her last Christmas message had been particularly personal, speaking of the loss of her beloved Philip. She spoke also of the lessons we learn through the eyes of our young children. Well, she often spoke openly of her faith, and on this occasion she spoke of the life of Jesus, a man whose teachings have been handed down from generation to generation and have been the bedrock of my faith. His birth marked a new beginning, she said. Well, I understand that there are those who are less enamoured with a monarchy than others, but I know of no honourable person who has not been moved in some way by the passing of this remarkable woman whom we have known as our Queen for the past 70 years. The celebrations earlier this year of her Platinum Jubilee were a clear indication of the love and respect the nation had for her, for a woman whose life of faithful, self-sacrificial service to our country and to the Commonwealth was an example for all. It's rare to see such a loyal sense of duty and commitment in this day and age. Well, for most of us alive today, she had been the only monarch we had ever known. My paternal grandmother lived during the reigns of 6 monarchs, having been born in the 62nd year of the reign of Queen Victoria, but most of us have known the reign of only Elizabeth the Great, as some are now calling her. Political leaders have come and gone, all kinds of changes have taken place around us, but our Queen has long reigned over us. So for those of us growing up in the UK and throughout the Commonwealth, she's always been a part of our lives, like our own parents or grandparents might have been. She was there on the throne at the time of our births, and it seemed as if she would always be there. But now she's gone. And personally, I'm finding it rather difficult to think that we will never see her again, that she'll no longer be there for us. The thing is that the Queen provided a sense of stability or continuity during most of our lifetimes. She's always been there for us through thick and thin, and one of the comments that I've heard repeated many times over these past few days is how she provided for the nation a sense of constancy in the midst of an unstable, uncertain and ever-changing world. As our head of state, though inextricably linked to the structure and processes of national governance, the Queen was wholly independent of the politics of the nation. And rather than being a political head, she was more like the head of a family. And I think that is one of the reasons why the Queen was loved so much by so many. And it's one of the reasons so many of us has found her passing to be so surprisingly saddening. But the Queen is dead. Long live the King. Well, over these past few days, I've been thinking a great deal about these things and why it might be that the passing of one whom most of us did not know personally should have such a profound effect upon so many people. Although I've felt at times as if I must be one of the only people who never actually saw her, let alone meet her, I've shared in what seems to have been a national feeling of irreplaceable loss. Of course, in her passing, we're reminded of our own mortality, but there's much more to it than that. And then I began to think of Uzziah and how his death might have affected the people of Judah in the middle of the 8th century BC. The book of the prophet Isaiah is a book of the vision of Isaiah which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of 4 kings of Judah. Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz and Hezekiah. And the book begins with what I think is a fairly lengthy introduction in which the prophet sets out the general message of the book. It's a message of justice and righteousness, looking forward to the coming of the salvation of God. I think the book properly begins in chapter 6, where the prophet describes what must have been a life-changing vision from God. He says, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim, and each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, 'Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory.' And the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me, for I am lost. I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Isn't that amazing? I mean, all that he saw, how could he ever be the same after seeing such a thing? In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the King, the Lord of hosts. The reign of King Uzziah was not as long as that of our late Queen Elizabeth, but at 52 years it was the second longest in the history of Judah. It had been a prosperous time for the kingdom, more so than at any time since the reign of Solomon. Lost territory had been regained, and successful military campaigns had been fought against the Philistines and other enemies too. Uzziah strengthened the fortifications of the city of Jerusalem, introducing new and advanced military defences, which must have provided a significant sense of security for the people living there. Well, even though the end of his life was marred by controversy, his death must have been a huge blow for the people. I mean, one can only imagine the feelings of loss, and though they may not have had the same emotional attachment as many of us have had with our late sovereign, it must have been an unsettling time for the nation. The stability which King Uzziah had provided for the people was now gone. The prosperity of the kingdom was on the decline, and the future was filled with all kinds of uncertainties. And the last thing they probably felt they needed was the death of one who had been such a successful ruler. And it's in this context that the prophet Isaiah sees this glorious vision. The king is dead. Long live the king. That phrase, long live the king, is first found in a number of English translations of a passage in the first book of Samuel. The nation of Israel were in the process of selecting the king whom Samuel had anointed. And Samuel said to all the people, "Do you see him whom the Lord has chosen? There is none like him among all the people." And all the people shouted, "Long live the king!" Well, we find the phrase repeated in a number of other places, but no mere human king was ever able to provide all we ever really needed. We might well now sing, "God save the king," but what we really need is a king who will save us. We need a king who will bring salvation to a lost and dying world. It was quite some time after the days of the prophet Isaiah when God sent another prophet, Zechariah, to his people, reassuring them of God's constant comfort and care. At one point he says, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. In his Gospel, John tells us that these things were written about the coming King Jesus, the one who brings salvation to a lost and dying world. And a little later, John tells us that it was the glory of Jesus that Isaiah saw in his vision when he saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. And when the foundations of the threshold shook at him, at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke, it was the glory of King Jesus that he saw, the Lord of hosts. If you like, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the King, the Lord of hosts. He saw King Jesus, the Lord of all lords, the King of all kings. Now, isn't that amazing? I'm saddened, truly saddened, by the passing of Queen Elizabeth. I'm saddened for the sake of her family, and I'm saddened for the sake of the nation. I believe we've lost a great leader, one who served as a fine example of service to others. And though I may well have been counted among her many subjects, I've long served a far more gracious, far more noble king. The king whom I serve is one who died, but now lives to die no more. He's the one who's been given all authority in heaven and on earth, highly exalted, and given the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Yeah, the Queen is dead, but our King, he will never die. Whatever this life might throw at us, he will always be there for us, our steadfast rock in times of trouble. Amidst an unstable, uncertain, ever-changing world of turmoil, King Jesus will always remain constant, the same yesterday and today and forever. Now that's amazing. And maybe there's been something here for us to think about today. May our ever gracious Father hold us in his arms and ever keep us safe. May he give us strength to face the changes we face in life, and be a true rock upon which we can always depend. And in this time of change and uncertainty within our communities, may God give us faith in order to shine like lights, showing others the reason for our hope. And may he bless us abundantly, so that we might truly be a blessing to all those around us. Thank you.